I am introducing the next roundtable. We'll have Kevin Indig, Peep Laja, and Ashley Faus join us to talk about the future of B2B SaaS marketing and how to win. I'll go ahead and welcome them into the room if y'all want to trickle in slowly, and we'll get the roundtable started. Hey, Kevin.
Unmute. Classic. How's it going?
Classic. Good. How are you?
Also.
Good.
Oh, here's
Pep. Dialing in from San Francisco, I hear.
Pep. You gotta sing because I cannot match Curtis's energy or quality. So one of us got to do it, and it's got to be you.
I am at a conference, and so I had to sneak out to find a corner at this hotel. It's really loud here, but hopefully it will work.
All right.
That's okay.
And
We're
Allie,
happy to
how
have
do
you. Kevin, what about you? Can you sing?
Not at all. You really don't want to hear me try. I think we'll go down to 0 people real quick. I can talk a little
We'll see
bit,
the numbers
but singing...
drop. No.
Yeah.
That thankfully we can deliver value elsewhere, right? That's why we're here today. I believe Ashley will still be hopping on soon, but I'll go ahead and give a rundown for the folks that are on with us. This is an interactive roundtable discussion. So just like the panel earlier, we're going to be accepting questions, and at the 30-minute mark, if we get enough engagement, we will open the floor for folks to join us with their cameras. That's optional. Alex Burkett might make his way on, I hope, but otherwise we'll just be chatting away. Our goal here, there she is. Hey, Ashley. How you doing? I think you're muted.
I am indeed. I'm back.
There you are. Thank you for joining us. I'm so happy to have you. Awesome. Well, I was just telling everyone, super interactive roundtable we can expect here today. I'll be paying attention to the chat and the question module. The overarching goal, as discussed on the website, is just to help this audience walk away with some information on how to build competitive moats across a variety of channels. So that's how we brought together 4 very different marketers here. I think we cross over in some ways, content, CRO, SEO, but ultimately I want us all to be able to speak to our specialties, our superpowers, about the future of B2B marketing and how to win. So I have some brief introductions, classic bios, just to give folks context in case they don't know y'all. So I'll read those real quick and then we'll get started. So Peep Laja, who's dialing in from a conference, became an entrepreneur in 2007. He focused on general marketing consulting until he specialized in CRO and became a very well-known name in that space. He's built companies CXL, Spiro, and Winter, and also hosts, ironically, the How to Win podcast, which I listened to quite a few episodes in preparation for today. Ashley Faus is a marketer, writer, and speaker by day, and a singer, actor, and fitness fiend by night. Her work has been featured in Times, Forbes, and the Journal of Brand Strategy, and she shared insights with audiences at Harvard Business Review, Inbound, and Marketing Pros, and she works at Atlassian. And Kevin is a growth advisor who specializes in defining and evolving organic growth strategies. Once a week, his newsletter, The Growth Memo, goes out to over 8,300 subscribers. In the past, he led SEO and growth at Shopify, G2, and Atlassian. He is also a new father, so let's give him a round of applause for just having a baby a couple weeks ago. Thank you for joining us in the midst of all of that.
Thank you. Great job, Allie. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Okay, so I figured we could start really strong. I hope you guys are ready. I'd love to hear from everyone what's something you believe about B2B marketing that you suspect most people or everyone would disagree with you about. And whoever wants to jump in first.
Ladies first. Ashley, do you have one, or if not, I can go. Okay, I go. In my mind, for 99% of companies, it really comes down to winning a few key terms, one category. It's actually a much more focused game than it seems like. And I think a lot of companies either miss that or shy away from that fierce competition.
You're talking through the lens of SEO.
Mostly through the lens of SEO, absolutely. But even the lens of, maybe clients. I think there's some key clients to win in every market. that will really catapult you forward. Maybe some key employees. I'm a big fan of mental models, and 80-20 Pareto rule is one of my favorites. And I think that applies to every aspect of the business: talent, customers, keywords and SEO, pieces of content. And so I think that's why so often we come back to this idea of focus. There are some exceptions, right? I worked at G2, which is a marketplace, very different game. That's much more spread out and fragmented. But for most SaaS companies that are not a marketplace, I think that's the case.
I can go next. I think from a thought leadership standpoint, having the C-suite be your only or primary thought leaders out in the market. I think a lot of teams are really focused on like, we need to do thought leadership for a founder or for a C-suite exec. And I pretty much disagree with that. And I think in a lot of cases, they don't have credibility with the audience. They are not the best people to speak on a number of different topics. And I tend to get a lot of pushback on that. I think people are coming around, but that's something where I think there's a lot of misguided effort poured into turning someone into a thought leader that really doesn't have any thoughts, is not a leader, and doesn't actually want to help and participate in that effort.
Yeah, the earlier discussion with the other group, Alex was saying thought leadership isn't as much an action as it is a result of other actions, which I thought was a really good way to reframe it, because when you kind of force it, it just doesn't feel very natural and it doesn't really perform.
Yeah.
Pep, what would you say here?
I don't think I have any controversial point of view. I mean, everything that I believe, I think people will nod heads and say, yeah, that's about right.
Okay. I've seen that in some of your stuff. And I'm excited to get into some of these tactics today, because I think what we'll talk about for the most part is not rocket science, right? So I'm really curious to hear kind of what we all have to contribute, and then maybe just discuss why some of this stuff isn't working for folks, if it is so straightforward. So yeah, we're here today because it's, as I've said online, it's never been easier to start a company, but it's never been harder to grow one. And there are tens of thousands of SaaS companies worldwide, 17,000 of which are in the US alone. So competition aside, let's start by talking through some macro trends that are changing the present and the future of B2B SaaS, we'll say.
Yeah, the noise in the market is definitely big, and so I think the big thing about the coming of AI is going to change everything. And so I don't know if you guys have heard about the changes that Google is considering end of the year. So basically, right now we have 10 spots on page 1 of Google search, right? And if you're on, page number 1 is great. However, the 10 is not going to go to a single answer. I don't think Google is going to do a single answer result, but it's going to be less. It's going to be maybe 5, 4, 3. And so that will blow up all your long tail SEO keyword strategy. Any company that is reliant on SEO is going to be in for a bumpy ride.
Fun times. But I think there's a really important point in there, Pep, that you make. We have a couple of trends that all influence B2B at the same time. And Pep mentioned noise. Very much agree. There's so many, maybe I shouldn't mention product management tools. Atlassian, don't get me wrong, but there's so much more competition these days. When Ashley and I actually worked together at Atlassian, which was a great time, there were not as many competitors. And these days, Asana, Monday, you name it, Notion, there's so much more happening. And that's the case in many categories. And I think part of that is the result of a zero interest rate policy time, right? It's just like a lot of venture-backed companies, a lot of shots on goal, and that goes away now. So I expect that noise to go down. However, at the same time, AI, it's on the same page as Pep. I think AI is going to have wide-ranging, massive changes. And you can see some of the biggest companies right now sprinting to get AI into all their products. Not running, sprinting, right? Microsoft, Google cannot move fast enough. Hundreds of thousands of engineers cannot move fast enough. Absolutely crazy. So you have these kind of trends collide. And I would argue that there's a third trend that is a bit overlooked, but basically a lot of people are attention deprived, right? Maybe I'm speaking for myself, but there's a lot of data that actually supports that people, are there's a lot happening. There's a lot of content out there. People have short patience or low patience for content, reading things, consuming content, right? And so all of that together paints a new landscape of B2B in my mind, where you have to be smart about standing out. But I would argue that if you combine all these trends, right? So it's hard to get attention. However, noise is probably going to go down, and we can do more with AI. And so, in my mind, the key message, the key takeaway, in my mind here, is that the companies who will leverage AI to gather attention the best way are the ones that are going to win long term. And now the question is, what will that actually look like?
Yeah, I think the last trend I'll touch on that's a little bit different from Pep and Kevin is the table stakes and the minimum viable skill set, knowledge, deliverables is much higher. So because there have been so many new competitors in the market and entrants into the market, and because that noise is so high, all of the tools make it possible for smaller or even individual creators or providers to compete with the incumbents. So I can get Canva and be a designer, right? Of course, all the graphic designers like, no, you're not a designer just because you have Canva. In the same way that all of the marketers and writers agree that you are not a writer just because you can copy and paste content from ChatGPT, right? But the baseline of quality, in my opinion, has gone up because all of the tools allow people to churn out all of that low quality stuff. You don't have to hire an expert in every case. You don't have to go through months and months of planning. You don't have to pour this massive budget in. Again, even just like phones and live streaming, all of the different podcasts that are coming on because it's so easy to create and produce. That means that the thing that you're actually selling or doing or producing, in order to stand out, that has to be uniquely human. And that is something that is much harder to capture. So that's another trend I'm seeing, is just the playing field and the baseline table stakes has been moved up because there are so many different tools that allow smaller players to compete with larger incumbents. So the ability to filter through that noise, that's the really hard part. It's not, oh, I don't have this in-house expert, or I don't have a huge team, or I don't have a million tools, or I don't have a budget. Like, there's free tools, there's cheap tools. And in a lot of cases now, especially with AI and kind of the proliferation of tools, the thing that sets you apart is what you as a human can bring to that.
There are also economic trends happening, right? So if we look at B2B SaaS today, average order values are down by around 30%. And deals take longer to close, maybe another 3 months, longer. Conversion rates are down because budgets are down. And so, depending on which function you sell into, you might want to change who you sell to. So, for instance, at Winter, one of my key buyers is product marketing. However, product marketing budgets have been slashed tremendously. And so everybody who's selling to product marketing is not having a great time today. And so, for instance, what we are doing is we are shifting to a new buyer. So we are now selling more into demand gen because they have more budget. And so we are basically not repositioning the tool, but the way I pitch demand gen people is different how I pitch, product marketing people. So, and probably it's happening across many titles and functions and sectors where, you have to look for a different buyer maybe, or diversify and don't be so reliant on selling to other SaaS companies because, maybe we are not in tech recession, but buyers believe they are in tech recession, and hence it's true.
Yeah, all about the perception there. Yeah, we've seen that shift with a number of our clients, as well as a lot of what I've been reading, in this case, towards enterprise, those larger, longer deals, that more sticky. And it's been interesting to see how that impacts a lot of the messaging, a lot of the positioning, and especially for our clients that have either been going after, I'll say everyone for the lack of explanation there, or they've been pursuing more of the individual creator. And now they're trying to go for the larger enterprise without alienating either. Have you all seen that shift in any of your work or observation?
Yeah, I certainly have. I work with several well-funded startups who also change the buyer or market segment, right? So either going from mid-market to self-serve and SMBs,
Mm.
much easier to finance, or well, easier to finance is probably the wrong wording, but much more affordable in many cases. You can test faster, you can get more reps in, learn faster feedback loop. And at the same time, though, I also work with some companies who have exhausted the mid-market segment, at least to their most available degree, and then now switch more to a enterprise model and are very targeted in that. So I think I think actually a lot of companies, maybe most companies, reevaluate and reassess what the right market segment for them is, and as Pep said, who the right buyer is. And that's very common in recessions, whether we have a recession or not, and what this is probably more debatable, but let me just call it a market shift, if you will. Very, very common for companies to reassess their ICP, their target audiences, and how they sell and what motions they go after, and that creates opportunity. Whenever there's movement, there it comes up, and so I think one thing that I find very critical right now is to closely monitor your competitors and see how do they change their target audiences, ICP, potentially positioning, and does that open up for you? Does that open a new gap that you can maybe fill? Are there other opportunities for you on the market? So movement creates opportunity, and I think building on what Pep has said, now is the time to be to measure that very diligently.
I think there's also been a shift where people are adopting some business models that have worked for others in the past. So I know, and I mean, Kevin said the same thing when we worked together at Atlassian, right? Atlassian was one of the early movers in what is now known as product-led growth, where you make it super simple for one small team to throw down a credit card, and then you expand organically in the organization into other products or seat expansion or feature upgrades, those kinds of things. And now all of a sudden everyone's like, product-led growth, that's the only way to grow, right? Like it used to be sales-led or channel-led. We've had, a variety of other options. So I actually think that it's interesting to see some of the companies that were early adopters of product-led growth are starting to do the upmarket, moving into a more traditional sales-led motion or an enterprise-focused motion, because everyone is now trying to do either the freemium model or like, we're going to be free forever. We have a free tier. And so now you're competing more specifically head to head on those upgrades where you weren't before. And so it's like, okay, well, if we're now having to compete with these smaller players who have basically adopted our business model that worked for us 15, 20 years ago, maybe now we need to start looking at some of the other players in the market and what business models got them there, and to see, okay, like changing your business model doesn't necessarily mean that you pick up the fun one for now. Like product-led growth is having a moment. I see that community-led growth is also starting to have more of a moment. So it's been interesting to see, I think, at Atlassian as well, as we've grown a more traditional sales team and we've started to move up market. So I would say that mindset shift around your ICP and how you go to market is not just chasing the next trendy business model. In some cases, it's going back to business models that worked for the buyer or for others in this space years ago. Like it might be new for you, but it may actually be something that was foundational to the success of another company in another category. Like I think there's also a lot you can learn from other categories. I think B2B is also taking a lot of plays out of the B2C, getting back to the human, thinking about what does this individual want? How can I reach them on a human level versus there is a suit behind a screen and I need to somehow convince them that, my product will leverage efficiencies for cross-functional collaboration, so that it's like, dude, there's so many words. What have you said? Right. So I think there's some interesting things happening where some of the shifts are going back to things that worked previously, not chasing the current trendy business model.
So let's talk about some tactics or channels or verticals, if we want to call them, and how these are having consequences across all of those. I know some of the questions y'all contributed were specific to some of these plays. Some were more general. So I want to start with SEO, Kevin. Alex sent a question in the absence of SEO, what should brands consider for scalable organic channels?
It's a great question. One that I really like is referral traffic. And I think referral traffic is this thing that people know from Google Analytics, but have never really considered strategically. But there are a couple of benefits of taking a closer look. Number one, from a sheer SEO perspective, referral traffic often goes hand in hand with good backlinks. I don't want to get too wrapped up in the technicalities of SEO, but we all know backlinks are important. They're still important, and referral traffic is actually a great proxy to understand if you have valuable backlinks and so on. But even outside of SEO, referral traffic is an organic play, right? You don't typically pay for placements or for links. Maybe sometimes from an SEO perspective, but in most cases you don't. And there is high intent coming from these links, and the majority of cases they are highly contextual, and they come with a little bit of a warm handshake, right? If the site refers you, whether that's a news outlet, a blog, or whatever else it is, could even be a social post, that referral means that somebody endorses you, right? And so if I wouldn't have access to SEO, my first question would be, how can I increase and grow referral traffic? What would I have to do that? And then the second one comes at the problem from a different side, and that is email marketing. I think email is fascinating, right? It's still the same motion that we had, like 40, 50 years ago. Somebody will probably fact check me on the right number for how long we have email, but still incredibly powerful. Everybody still has an inbox. Slack has not killed that yet. And it's this intimate environment where you can, engage with people. And what I see is that too many B2B companies basically just fire these like discount-like salesy emails and have so much room to grow to make it an actually engaging channel, right? So if I were to offer two alternatives to SEO that come from different sides, it's referral traffic, but then also once people are on the site, how can you get them into an email newsletter or email funnel that is attractive to them, that helps them, where we can then nurture them towards leads or customers.
Ashley, Pep, anything on SEO?
Yeah, I was going to say, I actually think that communities, and not in the sense of building your own community and forcing people to join your community, but going out into the communities that already exist. There's a number of Slack communities, Discord communities, there's LinkedIn groups, there's local meetups, right? Like there are a number of places where people are gathering, both online and offline. And so getting yourself and your people and your subject matter experts embedded in those communities, I think that's a really great way to grow. And I think one caveat to that is people often think like, okay, cool, I'm going to put all of my salespeople, I'm going to have them all join these Slack communities. And every time somebody asks a question, I'm going to be like, my products can solve this. And it's like, that is not community. That is the equivalent of cold calling, except in Discord or Slack or Reddit or wherever you're sending these people, LinkedIn. So in that case, I mean, similar to the benefits of SEO, right? True SEO is not just forcing people into buy my product. It is marrying up a problem and solution. And if I happen to have, a tool or a process that can help you, in addition to the general tips about educating you and that kind of stuff, cool, that's fine to include that. But the goal of this is not to force salespeople into communities so they start pitching. It's to actually embed, learn, educate people about the problem space, educate people about the solution space. And if there's, occasionally, to Kevin's point about the 80-20 rule, if there is an occasional 20% that makes sense for you to share something specific about your company, your product, or your service, do that. But it's primarily embedding those people in and building those relationships and educating.
So let's piggyback off SEO and talk about content marketing, namely AI. I know we're all top of mind for all of us. And I had a question here to start us off. What do y'all think about the improvements of AI generated content in the next 12 to 24 months? And how will this evolve the role of the marketer?
Well, I think one big change is that, most most people who write content are pretty mediocre at it. Like they're like
Mhm.
Googling 17 blog posts, rehashing the same things, and putting it together and then charging $1,000 for it. So all those people will be out of a job because ChatGTP can write mediocre posts much quicker, much cheaper, right? So the bar for humans will be much higher. And so the expectation for what is good content will also continuously increase, especially because the noise and it's so easy to produce. So having actual insights will be so much more valuable. So original research, original data, or just having been doing your job for 20 years and you have like wisdom, right? That becomes more valuable. So if you're a 22-year-old content marketer, oh, I don't know, man, like consider some other career.
Yeah, absolutely. Experience can't be replicated. Ashley, what do you think?
Yeah, I actually am very hopeful for the improvements. So, for example, one of the use cases that I think is excellent for AI is feeding in some other type of asset and asking it to spit out, a blog post based on a podcast interview, or 5 LinkedIn posts based on a blog post, or 3 key takeaways from an Ask Me Anything session. I think that's great. The limitations right now are kind of similar to some of the problems with transcription. Like in theory, you could just, throw this link into rev.com, but Atlassian actually gets chopped up in so many different ways. Like I can't even go through and do a find and replace because it misspells Atlassian or mishears Atlassian in a bunch of different ways, right? I'm seeing that same level of fidelity with some of the AI tools where you put it in and you're like, tell me the key takeaways or spit out these 5 posts. And you're like, you heard it or you read it or you saw it, but you didn't quite get there. So that's what I would actually love to see is, again, if we go back to the way we, unfortunately, teach kids in the US, where we basically say, we're going to give you this paragraph and you're going to read it. And then you're going to choose from a multiple choice answer set. What is the thesis of this paragraph? Or what is the main argument in this paragraph? And third graders, they don't really do well on those tests. We have to teach them. I feel like that's where we're at with a lot of the AI, is that it's got maybe a 3rd or 5th grade level understanding. And so I would love to see it get to college level or high school level ability to help me repurpose, because as an expert, doing that repurposing work is not fun for me. It's boring and it's annoying and it's very repetitive, right? Awesome. Give that to the robot. So let the human stop doing that so that they have time to think about all those smart insights that are actually differentiated, and give all of that repurposing work to the robots. Like I actually am very excited about that. So that would be great. If I could end up with like a high school level robot that can do all of that high school level work for me or college level work for me, that's phenomenal, because it now frees me up to go think of the hard stuff that you have to have experience, you have to have an expert, you have to have a deep understanding of the topic to be able to come up with.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with both points, or Pep's and Ashley's points. 2 quick things that I want to add to that. One is, and Pep alluded to this, is in terms of content, marketing, SEO, as soon as you can do something well with AI, it immediately loses value, right? There's this short window where that I mentioned earlier, where some companies adopt it and they use AI to maybe create content, but soon everybody will do it and will have very low cost. And so the value of it also shrinks tremendously. That's one thing. And the other thing is that technically, when we think about AI and marketing, technically everything we do, from SEO to positioning, product marketing, everything can be split into small little steps. Most of the time, we're not aware of these steps, right? We've learned this, we imitate it or whatever, but technically, from an engineering perspective, you can separate everything to smaller steps. And the way that AI impacts marketing is that it starts to slowly replace small steps. Not everything all at once, but slow steps. Maybe writing a draft, right? Maybe fleshing out a design, mockups, whatever, right? We've seen all the use cases. And that's where we then transition from the bottleneck being the legwork and getting stuff done towards thinking, strategizing, and actually wondering, okay, what do we want to create in the first place? If you can create anything, what should you create? And that's a very, very difficult question. Just imagine you could now, with a click or just with a voice prompt, tell an AI to create any type of content you want. And all of a sudden, right, there's a lot of options. And I think that's incredibly overwhelming. And so a lot more time will be spent thinking about what we should create, why we should create it, who it should be created for. And the creation part in itself will be reduced to a minimum. That's where I see AI going in the next 12 months.
I really related, Ashley, to what you said about AI removing just the mundane. And those that are afraid that AI will take their jobs, I feel like they're probably operating mostly in the mundane. So I feel like AI is a good challenge of, okay, they've got this or it's got this. What else can I do to innovate and iterate on the things I typically don't have time for? I'd love to learn how the three of you all have leveraged AI or ChatGPT or Jasper, any of those tools.
One thing that AI is really, really good at is analyzing large sets of data and making sense of it, which, for humans, it takes ages, right? Especially if it's like quant data of, millions of rows of whatever, but also unstructured data, like qualitative research. So my key use case today is speeding up analyzing unstructured data, like open-ended survey questions, for instance. ChatGPT is actually very good at analyzing unstructured data and making sense of it. It's not as good as humans, but it's instantaneous, right? And there's massive value there.
Starting point.
Yeah, the qualitative responses and like putting those into buckets and general sentiment analysis, I think is really awesome. A lot of that ability is built into some of our social listening tools already. So when we tell it we want to set up listening on this topic and we want to have some sense of an initial sentiment score, that's already built in, which is great. I think the other interesting thing, some funny use cases that we've done have been things like, okay, I need to write a bunch of variations of a landing page. And so you put it in, you're like, ChatGPT, generate 5 subheads about Jira, and another one, and another one, and another one, right? And you just see it go down the line. And it's actually really funny because it's basically paraphrasing, the website that we already have and the social media channels that we already have and, community pages and things like that we already have. But it's funny to think of that versus what a human would do to say, generate 20 headlines so that I can pick that out. Another one that I think is really interesting would be subject lines for emails. Same thing where you kind of feed it in to say, hey, here's the content of the email, spit out 3, 4, 5 different headlines for me. And obviously we would then test that, in our tools and send it to a subset of the audience and those kinds of things. But anything where you need a slight variation on an existing thing, most humans are kind of too close to it to come up. It's like, well, I already came up with something smart. So I don't really have other smart things. Like, I like the way I said it the first time. So throwing that at ChatGPT and being like, and another one, and another one, and another one, and seeing if there's anything interesting. That's been a fun experiment that has made its rounds through the Slack channels for us.
Yeah, those are great. Some other ways that I used AI for, one is to actually create blog content for certain topics. It does incredibly well. And the one thing that I want to point out is that you need human oversight. You need an editor, fact checker. I would never publish, at least at this stage, ChatGPT or any AI content for that matter blindly. So with editing and reviews and all that kind of stuff, it does incredibly well for some topics, not for all of them. The other one, for data, for outlier detection, all that kind of stuff. There's actually a really cool tool by Google itself, by the TensorFlow team, called Simple ML for Sheets. And it allows you to train basic data models and then find outliers or missing data without coding. Super simple. You literally just mark a couple of columns with data, it model learns, and then you tell it to predict how this moves forward. And then the last one is extracting insights from conversations. So actually some really cool tools out there that allow you to use transcripts, for example, to find key insights in customer conversations that you would have to read manually and find manually beforehand. And that becomes very powerful, right? This is where we bring this back to a human-focused marketing play, if you will, because that we can now much better structure the data, as Pep actually said, that was previously unstructured, and that's especially valuable when it comes to conversations between sales, customer success, or support and customers.
Yeah, these are great answers. We have about half the time left, so I'm just going to move us on to another playbook, events. I know, Pep, you're at one right now. You run CXO Live in spring, which we are going to in a couple months. People are hungry to be together, but they're knowledge sharing and consuming so much content online. So talk me through how the B2B SaaS world today is affecting the event playbook.
The events are back, right? They're crowded. But the thing is, what I've learned about my event, and also today talking to Pavilion people whose event I'm at, is that you need an agenda and speakers, because otherwise you can't sell a ticket, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But really, people are there for the people, right? It's all about who is in the room. Ideal event in my book is like there's no agenda. You just talk to people. It's, you know, facilitated conversations and things like that. But events, I think, are still super powerful for sales and marketing, because you go and, like, if you meet somebody in person and you get to know, and, you know, maybe it's a fit for your product, it's much easier to sell anything if you have a personal relationship. And that's what events are for. And also the same goes for remote events, you know, using events as a form of outbound marketing. You know, instead of cold calling people, you invite them to your shows. So you could really do 10 podcast episodes a day, every single day. You don't give a shit if anybody listens to any of those episodes. It's about getting that person, you know, on the show and basically making them aware that you exist, right? So if you cold call, hey, you buy my product, blah, 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 that's boring. But hey, come share your thoughts about this and this. People are much more likely to say yes. And so I think we're going to start seeing jobs like full-time podcaster, and a company might hire 20 of them, all right? And instead of BDRs making 500 dials a day, they do, you know, 50 podcast episodes a day. Have you guys seen Nathan Latka's calendar for podcasts? Like, the guy does 20 episodes a day sometimes, you know, like
that's so much talking.
Yeah, but like if you know, you take it as sales and marketing, not as you know, you gotta love it, you know, like if you hate talking to people, then you should do something else, you know.
Yeah, some people really enjoy spending their time that way all day. Pep, you said events have to have an agenda. Have you been to any of these intimate dinners with CEOs, CMOs, and how have those experiences been for you?
Oh, plenty. So in terms of logistics, how to set it up to make it work, I hate the format where you sit down and, you know, your quality of the evening depends on who you sit next to, you know. Yeah. And if it's the wrong people, then it's a wasted evening. So if you're gonna organize them, and I highly recommend them, I don't the setup I want to do is standing only, and so it's hors d'oeuvres, cocktail tables, and you move around and mingle and talk to people. That way, you know, you're never stuck with anybody, and you can, you know, talk to a lot of people. And a lot of B2B SaaS companies do this on a regular basis as a form of marketing. So right now, maybe on LinkedIn, you've seen like companies like Metadata, SQL, and so on. They just do like a roadshow in every city. They do these sponsored dinners, and basically it's like they invite 50 to 100 people. And then the 4 sponsors basically pick up the bar tab, and which is like maybe 4,000 per sponsor. And you get the, you know, your 50, 100 ICPs in a room, quality engagement. I mean, it's very good marketing cost, probably cheaper than LinkedIn ads, you know? So the question is like, how can you scale that, and how can you do more of that? If you read Salesforce is behind the cloud, I mean, that was a big part of Salesforce's marketing back in the day, where they did meetups. Salesforce just paid for the beer. There were no speakers. It was just about, you know, getting the ICPs in the room and building relationships. And so that playbook, I think, is going to be more and more important, especially with, because like producing content is going to be, you know, cheap and low quality now. So that's something that only humans can do, is like build relationships.
Yeah. Ashley and Kevin, what are your experiences with events?
Yeah, I can wholeheartedly agree with Pep. I think during the pandemic, we learned that we can take the content part and do that remotely, but we cannot do the human connection part. And so I've seen many people try different formats, some really creative, but connection remotely is just not the same as in person. No surprise there. I don't think anybody's shocked, but I totally agree. I actually don't. I mean, now with the baby, I do maybe one speaking engagement this year anyway. But even previously, I think the point of going to a conference and giving a presentation is just boring most of the time, because you can record that stuff in much better quality and watch that at home at a much more comfortably, right? So the big question is, how can events evolve, and what are good events in a post-COVID world? We all want to connect. We all want to be with each other. We all want to kind of share some knowledge. So I think these smaller, more intimate events are very interesting. But to be honest, I think events are like email, right? They haven't really changed over the last 20 years or maybe 30 years. And so I'm still surprised that nobody has come out with a much more innovative format that is engaging, that maybe has you learn a couple of things, but that's mostly less focused on presentations that you can record at home, but more so on in the moment knowledge sharing and engagement.
Yeah, I think as somebody, I've spoken at quite a few events and I love public speaking. There is something that is different about being live in the room with the audience and getting that feedback versus just recording at home in my living room. I think honestly, the big value of events in terms of going in person is that it forces you to be present, right? Like if I have a podcast playing in the background or I have a webinar playing in the background, it's in the background. I am not giving it my full attention. If I go and pay to sit in a room, in most cases, I'm much more likely to turn off all the rest of the distractions. So I actually think that's the big value add, even with continuing to have some presentations, especially for people to have presentations also kind of anchor you into a relationship. So you can ask people, oh, what presentations did you hear? What do you think of them? Were they interesting? Obviously, that starts to build a relationship between the speaker and the audience. So I have great conversations with people who come up to me after a presentation and say, oh, you said this or that, or, oh, I have this very specific question. And then other people who are listening are like, I actually have that question too. And I'm like, cool. Should we take this and go get coffee? And now we're going to discuss this question. Yeah. That's a lot harder for them to do if we just bump into each other at the networking party while we're all, it's a little weird. So I actually think that it does help to have some of those presentations as a starting point to build those relationships. One piece that I want to touch on that I've been kind of screaming about for years is the way event content gets promoted online, particularly on social. Everything is come to booth 123, join me at booth 123. If you're at the show, come to booth 123. And I'm like, most of your followers are not on site, right? Like even massive events like Inbound that have 25,000 people or something like that, each of the speakers and sponsors may have an online audience that is bigger than that, or they've got a subscriber list or something like that, right? So the likelihood that your audience online is actually on the ground at the show, that is a terrible experience. You're basically spamming your feed for 3 days straight, and I hate it. So any way that you can start to think about how do we tell those stories online and offline so that we unite it. And it's also awkward too, because if you meet someone online or if you meet someone offline at the booth, what incentive do they have to connect with you on LinkedIn or follow you on Twitter or, join your Facebook group if they pull up the feed and all they see is, I'm at a show, I'm at a show, I'm at a show. And they're like, I'm already at the show. So what am I learning from you by engaging with you in this other place? So I think that's another big piece of it is how you unite those online and offline touch points for both sides of that equation is something that really needs to evolve, because right now it's so focused on what I would say registration or acquisition and not on continuing those conversations. I also have had a number of opportunities to meet people at a conference who I've been talking with online for years. And so when we meet up, it's like, oh, cool, I'm just grabbing dinner with a friend. By the way, that post last week, and now we're just continuing our conversation. And that is another piece of it where I think we need to have better interplay and a longer term relationship between those two. So it's not, I go to a conference to hear information. It's at the conference, I'm building relationships or continuing relationships that are happening in other spaces.
Yeah, the number of times I've met people from Twitter in person for the first time, and I'm like, I feel like I already know you. It's actually such a fun phenomenon. Sticking with the human to human theme, I'd like to talk about influencers now. And I'm going to open it up through the lens of micro influencers, how companies can operationalize that, as well as the difference between the influencers that are influencing on behalf of themselves, those creators, solopreneurs, contractors, and the rise of in-house people who are building their own personal brand and perhaps marketing their company in the process. I know that was a big question, but I just want to open up the floor to what you all are thinking about that and any trends you've seen there.
Oh, I was gonna say, I'll go ahead and jump in. I think one thing that I would love to just level set on this is that finding influencers is very hard, because otherwise you're just paying someone to be an ad spokesperson for you. And there is a place for you to pay a spokesperson, and that's great. They are not an influencer, and it is not going to be an effective partnership if you basically say, here's $5,000 and, you know, a video and copy for you to post on LinkedIn or TikTok or Instagram for me. That's a paid ad placement, and that's fine, but that is not influencer marketing, and it is not going to net the results and the benefits of true influencer marketing. So that's my like one spicy thing is I keep seeing people be like, again, we're going to do influencer marketing. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to pay to place this script in this person's channels. And again, that's an ad buy. That is not an influencer strategy or an influencer partnership. So Pep, I know you also were like quick with the unmute button, so I'll pass that, but I just wanted to kind of level set in terms of like, what are we talking about here when we talk about influencers?
Well, that is an interesting question, because what is influencer marketing? We might have different definition, because it's like you're using somebody's influence, and it takes money. Nobody's going to do it out of their good heart. I'm sure they're nice people, but they want cold hard cash. So I do quite a bit of for winter influencer marketing in two ways. So one is, who is somebody relevant, pay them money, and they post on my behalf on LinkedIn. I mean, I don't give them script. The script is theirs. It's just that I want them to plug something, right? And it's very effective. We used to do a lot of newsletter advertising, and compared to paying people to post on your behalf on LinkedIn, like LinkedIn is so much more effective than putting your sponsored blurb in a newsletter. So it absolutely works, at least for winter. The second thing is you being an influencer yourself. I mean, I'm working very hard to be the chief evangelist and to grow my influence, posting content every day, and it works. I drive 80% of my pipeline just by posting on LinkedIn, and I'm not plugging my product too often, every now and then. But it's mostly like just valuable content, and so you're an influencer, and so people pay attention to you. And marketing is a game of attention, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Influencers or influencer marketing has gotten such a bad rep. It's almost like growth hacking, and both of these ideas were great, and then it kind of got dragged through the mud for different reasons. And now we call it creators and paying creators, and I think that's also fine. It's mostly a different name, but I can confirm it works really well. And I come in from both sides. I have some paid sponsorships from a newsletter, for example, or a podcast. And at the same time, I work with companies or consult companies who lean on influencers or creators. And I think it helps dig through the noise, because people follow people, right? They don't follow brands. When was the last time you followed a brand on LinkedIn or Twitter that was not Wendy's or Arby's or some fast food chain? And I think that's in some parts the antidote to ad blindness, banner blindness, noise, right? Is a well-placed collaboration. And it's sometimes, I mean, I could totally agree with Pep's point here. Like I get so many clients through LinkedIn. It's not even real. And from a company perspective, I want to go back to what Ashley said earlier, which is, you're not going to be successful with a company account, but maybe if the CEO has a good content strategy for LinkedIn, that can be immensely powerful. I've seen it at G2, where Gordon Arbel, the founder, he's more active on LinkedIn and social, and there's a team to help him with that, right? I mean, CEOs don't have a lot of time, and that in my mind is a much better investment of time than trying to push a company account forward, because people always look at it in a different way.
Another thing we do is, like, whenever a customer gives us unsolicited praise, through live chat or whatever the medium is, if the relationship is there, I ask them, hey, would you please post on LinkedIn about it? And sometimes I bribe them, and sometimes they, it's just like, pretty please. And again, very effective. If somebody of influence praises a product, I like this product, it works.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Go for it, Ashley.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think, and I popped this into the chat too around the internal influencers, that the goal, in my opinion, in all the influencer marketing, and the thing that differentiates it from kind of traditional advertising, where you have spokespeople, is that yes, there's money involved, you're paying people, you're incentivizing people, but it's their words, it's their experience. It's the reason that they have influence and trust with their audience is because it's authentic to them. And so to Pep's point, where he's like, yeah, we use influencer marketing, we pay them, but I don't give them a script. Oh, no. I tell them, like, this is kind of the thing that I'm wanting them to achieve. And then they say it, film it, write it, whatever it is. That's the right way to do it. And if you find people who are already passionate about the problem space, the solution space, and yes, if they also happen to be passionate and users or an audience of your solution to this problem, even better. But I find that a lot of people mistake a large following for influence to the right audience that they're trying to reach, or they mistake partnering with that influencer to being like mandating that they speak about something. So for example, we actually have some partnerships with some influencers, and one of them just went to our event in Berlin. And so we basically said, like, yeah, we'd love for you to create a couple of assets in this vein. Otherwise, like, here you go to the event and whatever strikes you, And yes, there were some product announcements at the event, and it's like, he's not stupid. He knows he needs to talk about that, but he honed in on the elements within those product announcements that he was personally very excited about. And so we didn't come to him and say, here's the 10 new features that you need to talk about. He pulled out the 2 or 3 things that were very important to him and very exciting to him, and said, personally, I love this new thing because in my instance, I've been trying to solve this problem, and now this feature does that. So giving them that ability to run, and same thing for your internal influencers. I don't have a massive following on LinkedIn, but I'm active. I have a decent following. And so it is not uncommon for other teams to come to me and be like, Ashley, will you post this? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to post that, because it has nothing to do with what my audience cares about. Right. And so even this event that I actually worked on, it was our Unleash event that happened in Berlin. It's primarily focused on folks who are in the Agile and DevOps community. That's not my community. The people that I've built trust with are primarily marketers. And so for me to go out and constantly say, like, come to the event, register for the event, join the event, my audience doesn't care. That's not the influence that I have with them. So I did 2 posts, actually. One post was a shout out to the team and basically saying, this is what teamwork looks like, and here's what goes into planning an event like that. And so massive shout out to my team for doing this and saying, hey, marketers, if you're curious and want a masterclass in a keynote, watch this one, because my boss wrote it, and here's her process, and you're going to see what it looks like to do a good keynote. The second post I did was basically showcasing how we focused on our audience And then I said, if you work with these people, if you know these people, if you wouldn't mind referring this to the actual target audience, here's what they can expect and why this is good marketing. That was the only 2 posts I did. And those posts actually performed fairly well because I spoke to my audience in the right way versus just saying, we're going to unleash. Like, my audience doesn't care about that. It's the same thing with internal and external influencers. It doesn't matter how big their following is if it's the wrong following.
Yeah, that's incredibly important to remember, especially for those internal influencers posting on behalf of their company, but they really are also trying to grow their personal brand. So sometimes it's a delicate balance. I know we only have 10 minutes left. I feel like we could talk for quite a while about this, but I'd love to kind of flip the question on its head that we opened with. A lot of the tactics that we talked about, ones that have been around for a long time, like events, newer ones, like working with influencers, the trend with AI, I don't know about y'all, but none of this stuff is quantum mechanics, right? It's relatively straightforward. It's not always easy, but it's relatively straightforward. So I'd love to hear from this group. Why do some companies struggle to win even when they do implement some of these things?
I can jump in. I think because execution is incredibly hard, right? It all comes down to execution. And knowing what to do is often not as big as a problem of doing it. Again, I spoke about focus earlier. It's incredibly easy to get distracted, especially with all the new AI stuff coming out and all the other things happening, macro landscape, SVB, people get distracted left and right. But you can tell when a company executes well, right? Like, look at Microsoft right now. They used to be, not in a great spot. I would say until Satya Nadella became CEO, and now it's almost reversed, where Google is actually they're not executing well at all. So, and I don't want to always call out these big brands, but we all know them. We can all see them in the limelight. So that's why I'm speaking mostly to them. So execution is the problem. Good execution is not yet replaceable with AI or anything else. And I think that's why the playbooks are relatively clear, but getting them done is the biggest problem. And not a lot of people are talking about how to execute well. Maybe I should post more of that on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I feel like there's just as much noise in the tactical space as there is in like the overarching SaaS space. Like, as a marketer, there's so much to do. And some of it's right, some of it's wrong. Like Ashley said, you really have to pay attention to your business, not necessarily following the trends, the macro trends. But yeah, I feel like when it comes to execution, it's hard to just hone in and focus and hope and wait for things to happen.
I think the other issue, I heard it called the peanut butter strategy, which I actually really like. And that's spreading yourself too thin. It's like, we're just going to take some peanut butter and slap it all over everything. And you're like, okay, yes, there's a lot happening there, but now your tongue is stuck to the roof of your mouth and you don't have a glass of milk. And like, I actually don't want to eat any of this because it's just peanut butter everywhere. And so I actually think that the problem is people try to do too many things. And I think this is especially hard for large companies where they actually have a healthy budget, they have enough people. And so they're like, we're going to be in every channel, every time. We're going to do all the keywords. We're going to do all the videos. And you're just like, okay, you can't actually be everywhere all the time because your audience is not everywhere all the time. So where is the audience? Focus in on that. What are they asking? What are their pain points? What do they need to do? Focus on that, right? So I actually think that the opposite is almost true, that people are not implementing the right things. They're implementing everything. That's the first issue. The second issue is they're not actually giving stuff time to work. It takes a lot of time to build relationships. It takes a lot of time to actually find the right people, find the cadence, and build relationships with them. And so I see this a lot as well, where people will say, okay, we need to write new content for SEO to rank tomorrow. Oh, okay, nowhere in there did I hear anything about an audience. Nowhere in there did I hear anything about an actual business goal. I just heard do a tactic very quickly and expect it to work today. And if it doesn't, kill the tactic.
It's wrong.
Find the next tactic. And you're like, okay, well, things take time to work. And if we haven't defined that audience, we haven't defined that goal, it doesn't matter how many tactics you implement, you're not actually going to hit, like, you're not going to solve these problems. So I think that's my two big things is everyone's trying to do everything and they do not give things enough time to actually work because they're so busy trying to focus on doing everything.
Yeah, exactly right. I agree with both of you. The quality, is everything. So, like, I mean, there's a book that becomes a bestseller, and there's a book that nobody reads. They both have words. It's printed, or movies. Some movies are blockbuster, and the other one not. And like, why? I mean, it's the quality of the movie, right? So, same. Just because you do a webinar or a blog post or an event or whatever, just doing it is does not work. And so quality should never be sacrificed. Yes, you should try to do more and increase speed, but the whole idea that everybody speaks about today is like we should do now more with less because we have less people and budget. Actually, we need to do less with less. Right? We need to do less with less. So quality should never be sacrificed. But you can speed up and do more by cutting down on scope, cutting down on waiting and politics and the internal how fast do we go from we should do this to it's done. I mean, usually it's like 3 weeks of trying to schedule meetings is like where you lose the time. So all of that can be sped up, and you can do more if you just fix your internal processes. Yeah.
Yeah, doing less with less and doing it much better than anybody else. So we have about 4 minutes left. I'd like to go around and y'all just share maybe your personal calls to action where folks can find you if you have anything you want to promo or shout out just before we wrap things up.
Well, I'll go first then. 2023, right? Need to do less with less. So you need to convert to people already hitting your website, right? Like that's the quickest path to win. And how do you do that? I mean, mostly it's words. So use winter.
I think mine will be around getting back to the humans behind the screen. So fall in love with the humans behind the screen, right? Like there are a lot of strategies and tactics from a tooling perspective or from a strategy perspective or from a measurement perspective. But at the end of the day, the humans behind the screens are the ones that are making decisions and have problems to solve, and they're the ones who are going to buy. So fall in love with the humans. I popped it in the chat as well, but this social media spectrum, in terms of ambassadors versus influencers or whatever, if folks want to DM me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to send a couple posts that detail that spectrum in more detail.
Love it. And I'll go last. I spoke a lot about execution, and I think part of really good execution is to know where you are. So in my mind, 2023 is all about orientation, knowing how to execute, what your market is, who your customer is, and where you are as a company, right? Like, I mean, this can have take so many shapes from, do we need to lay people off? Do we have the right people? Do we have the right tools? Have we done the right things? What has worked? So for me, it's all about knowing where you are right now. And it sounds simple, but it's very complicated. I try to cover a lot of that on my newsletter, the growth memo, and other than that, follow Pep, follow Ashley, follow Ellie, Omniscient Digital, and that's it for me.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for your time. Pep for calling in. Kevin has a new baby. Ashley, so happy to have you. Really appreciate all your time today.
Thanks so much. Great job, Ellie.
Bye, you all. Thank you. Bye, you all.
Bye.
Bye.